Bamidbar. Parshas Bamidbar. There's a ton here. I'm going to speak out to start. Probably I don't want to say the most famous vart in all of Torah because then everyone has to argue that it's not the most famous vart in all of Torah. But it's a very famous line, and then we'll hopefully get into something nice. And I want to tell over a story that I saw recently. I shared it at a tzedakah gathering. Anyone who's watching on their computers right now is getting drunk. Apologies. There you go. That's a little better. Okay. It's making me nervous. Wasn't straight. Okay. So it says the pasuk that Moshe Rabbeinu is going around and he has to count Klal Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu has to find out how many Yidden are there. Says the pasuk. This is in Parak Gimel pasuk Tezayin v'yifkoid osam. Moshe counted them al pi Hashem. He counted them through the mouth of Hashem. And Rashi quotes the famous Medrash, which we really read to remind ourselves of it, so that we could, some things, as Mesil Saram says, are so obvious to us, but we don't really inculcate them into our lives. Says Rashi, Amar Moshe Lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Moshe says to Hashem, Heich ani nichlas teichal aleihem. How can I go into their tents? Ladas minyan yonkeihem. How am I going to figure out how many yidden there are? Amar Lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Hashem says the famous words, that these are words, I'm surprised that they're not a song yet. Maybe they are. Aseh ato shelcha v'ani e'eseh sheli. You do yours and I'll do mine. Halach Moshe v'amar al Pesach ha'ohel. Moshe goes and stands. V'ashchina mikademes lefanav. And the Shechina comes in front of him, and a baskel comes out and tells him how many Yidden there are. A very famous, well-known medrash. But the implications of the medrash are incredible. That in our entire life, we can never say, I can't do it. There's no such words in Yiddishkeit that's impossible. Because the moment it is impossible, that's the moment Hashem kicks in. The moment that Nachshon ben Aminadav is standing there, the water up to his neck, he's about to drown, boom, the water splits. The moment everything seems lost, that's when the nace happens. Hashem is always telling us, Aseh ata shelcha va'ani e'eseh sheli. You do yours, and I'll do mine. So this brings to mind a line, a very powerful line, very powerful line. What does it mean? Hashem says, you do yours and I'll do mine. Often, this might sound a little crazy, we're trying to do Hashem's job. What does it mean we're trying to do Hashem's job? We sometimes think, and I'll give an example that's not really within anyone, because it's easier to hear an example that's that you're not in, and then hopefully we could apply it to yourself. We've all heard stories of a Rebbe that is so involved with his class 24 hours a day. His wife suffers, his family suffers, his own health suffers, and sometimes you hear stories like, wow, this Rebbe's the best, and other times you hear a story that this Rebbe has gone too far. Where does that come from? So some people say, oh, it comes from a bad place. No, it comes from a place that this Rebbe who's going above and beyond to the point that he's never home and his family's suffering and he's suffering. You know what he's doing? He's forgetting that your job in this world is to do yours and let Hashem do his. Your job is not to be Hashem. What does that mean? When you hit the limit of what you could do, that's where you stop. You don't now say, oh no, I'm going to sacrifice my entire life, my entire family for the sake of this cause. Who told you that's the right thing to do? Now, obviously, there are times, and no one should, Avada Hatzalah, you get up in the middle of the night, and of course, there are times that the Rebbe is supposed to go above and beyond. But when you're at the point that it's enough, when the marriage is suffering, we'll say, the extreme point. We've all heard of such a point. What's going on deep down in that person's mind is he is missing this very basic Maimer Chazal, which he probably taught 1,000,000 times. The Maimer Chazal, Hashem tells us, don't worry about me. I'm a big boy. God says, I can take care of myself. You don't have to take care of me. You do yours, and I'll do mine. Moshe Rabbeinu, go to the entrance of the tent. What do you mean? Moshe Rabbeinu could have figured out some crazy way to whatever. We know Moshe Rabbeinu by the Mishkan. He tries to pick up the Mishkan, right? The beams. They're so big, he can't do it. He tries, and all of a sudden Hashem helps. I don't know, maybe Moshe Rabbeinu should have become a bodybuilder. Maybe now he has a commandment to build a Mishkan. He should have said, okay, you know what I'm supposed to do right now? I'm supposed to go become a bodybuilder, and then I'll be able to lift up the Mishkan. No, your job is in your situation of life and in every situation of life to do what you can do. And when you're at the point that you're done, then Hashem takes over. And it's a very empowering feeling because often, and this could be, I give an extreme example, and obviously this could be portrayed in everyone's own lives as well. You do as much as you can do. And when you're past that limit, that's it. I do what I can. I do what I can. And at that moment is when one is finished. And this is something that really is, in everyone's life, there are moments that we become Hashem, unfortunately. And by us becoming Hashem, it's obviously the biggest kfirah, because if we believed in Hashem, we wouldn't become Hashem in a negative way. We would realize, no, I do mine. I'm learning Chavos Lavavis now. We're about to finish it. At the end, he has a whole parak in which he talks about people that, does this sound familiar to anyone? A guy is comfortable, he has money, and he's working like crazy hours. And someone says to him, what are you doing? He says, no, I'm saving up. What are you saving for? My kids. A few years later, the man is mega. Buddy, what are you doing? The grandkids. Okay. A little later, you're still working like a meshuggah. My wife, the kids, the grandkids, and you never know. Could we go into this guy's mind, which the Chavos Lavavis does? This guy is being kofer in Hashem. Why is he being kofer? He does not believe one iota. He's asking Hashem for security on everything. It's not enough that I have 1 million, 5 million, 10 million, whatever the number is. People get people get emotional when you start putting numbers on things. No, what do you mean? Just for tuition. Okay. Whatever that number is, I think we all, think about the other guy, and then it's easy to understand what we're talking about. And then one day, we become mature and we can plug it into our own lives. But what's really going on is people, we have to always remember, asay atay, do yours. We do our ishtadlus. We do what we could do. And then, I don't know who I was talking to recently. I think it was Ben, which he might be bouncing in any moment with an ISIS. But I think it was Ben, and we were remarking, do you think about what was like a person who worked 20 years ago? He left the office at whatever it was, 5, 6 o'clock at night, and he was done. Or maybe you could call him, call the guy in his house phone. There's no such thing just send him a message, I'll take care of it. I'll send him an email, I'll take care of it. Okay, send him a fax. It's a totally, if you think about it for a moment, we work. What are your hours? There aren't, It's just straight. Which, okay, listen, each in their own, but there comes a point that we have to tell ourselves, what is the hishtadlus that we need to do? I do mine, and let Hashem do the rest. And what happens when we do that? What happens is the baskel comes out. What happens is the nace happens in Kriyas Yamsuf split. What happens is the Mishkan gets picked up on its own. What happens is when we take our burden and we let Hashem carry it, we do ishtadlus. We do as much as we're supposed to do. And then when we finish that line, we say, Hashem, the rest is yours. You know what Hashem says? Oh, no problem. I can carry it. I'm a big boy. So this is a very deep and encouraging, empowering message of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which we all knew, but we're just going to take it one step deeper than we always knew. We always knew the idea of do your own and let Hashem finish. But if we think about it in a mature way, we'll realize it gives us chizik in ishtadlus. It gives us chizik in bitachon. It gives us chizik in all the areas of our life that sometimes we feel that we're suffering, we're drowning. I can't do it. How could I have a job and a family and this? I can't. Slow down. Did you do what you're supposed to do? Now you're finished. But I didn't. Well, Hashem didn't make you a malach. Hashem created us human beings with all our faults and all our issues. And Hashem knows that we're limited creatures, and how much could we do? We can only do as much as humanly possible. And you're right, maybe at this stage of your life, you can't do A, B, C, D, E, F, G all the way down. Okay. Asay atah, do yours. And Hashem will pick up the rest. So now I want to go one step deeper, and this is the story I'm going to bring out. What one of the problems with this are. I'm going to tell a story. The story is really about tzedakah. And the real reason I'm sharing this story is I think it's a story that needs to be shared. Because the lesson of this story is so huge. And I'll give you, I told it to one person, the friend of mine I was telling you about, who's Baruch Hashem on the way back to Yiddishkeit, and he told me how he sees this every moment of his life. So let me tell you the story. The Karlina Rebbe, the Beis Aron of Karlin. One day he's sitting in his study. A woman comes in, crying, uncontrollable. Rebbe, you have to help me. You have to help me. What's the problem? My daughter, Baruch Hashem, she's about to be engaged to a wonderful boy, a Talmud Chacham, a Yeri Shemayim, a Gevaldik, a beautiful family. The problem is I have no money. And if I don't come up with the nedunya, with the dowry, the boy's family is not going to let them get engaged. They're going to call off the whole shidduch. And it's terrible because it's such a beautiful shidduch and he's such an amazing boy and they could have such beautiful children and they could be a Labais, Naman be Yisrael, but what am I supposed to do? Rebbe, what am I supposed to do? I don't have the money. And the Beis Aaron says, how much money do you need? And she gives a sum. He gets up, he goes to his bookshelf, pulls out an envelope, takes out the wad of cash, counts out what she needs, and hands her the money. And she's like euphoric. He just gave her the entire amount. She can't stop saying thank you, and she walks out a different person. A few days later, there's a knock on the Karlina Rebbe's door. The Rebbetzin goes to the door, and who does she see standing there? The same woman, uncontrollable in tears again, from the world. She opens the door. What do you need? I need to speak to the Rebbe. I need to speak to the Rebbe. I need to speak to the Rebbe. Okay. She takes this woman. She brings her into the Rebbe. The Rebbe says, what's wrong? Is everything okay? Is it shidduch? Yes, Baruch Hashem, they're engaged, and there's a wedding date, and it's amazing. So what's the problem? Rebbe, how could I walk my daughter down to the chassan? I don't have a gown. I don't have a new dress. I'm supposed to walk my daughter down in shmatas? Some say the version was that she says, I need a fur or something. How can I walk my daughter down? And the Rebbe says, how much do you need? She gives a sum. And the Rebbe gets up and he walks to the bookshelf and he takes out the envelope and he takes out the money. He hands her the money and she's elated. She can't imagine it. And she walks out. The Rebbetzin, after closing the door, turns back to her illustrious husband and says to the Karlina Rebbe, I don't understand. I don't understand. The woman came, the shidduch's going to fall apart, a beautiful shidduch. You gave her a sum that was crazy. But fine, I understand. But for a gown, a fur, a dress, the daughter could get married with her mother not there. She could walk her down not dressed so nicely. What's the big deal? So we think, at this point of the story, we think that the Rebbe is going to tell her, which there are stories of Gedolim that say such, and I think it was Rav Pam that one time said it. What if it was your daughter? If it was your daughter, it would be important for you to be dressed properly, right? Because it's someone else's, they don't deserve what you deserve? Which, that would be a beautiful ending. But it goes much deeper. And the Rebbe says, how could you give her this money? And the Rebbe says, you know what? I was thinking the exact same thing. As I got up from my chair, and I'm walking to the bookcase, I'm thinking, she needs a gown? What? She could walk down on what she has. I already gave her so much money. And the Rebbe says, exactly. You know what? There's so many better causes. What about the people who mamash have no money and people that can't put bread on their table? What about all of them? And the Rebbe says to his wife, you know what? As I was taking out the envelope, I thought the exact same thing. How could it be? To give money for a gown and where there's so many Yisayimim, and there's so many Aniyim, and there's so many poor people, and so many good causes. And then the Rebbe turned to his wife and said, and then I grabbed hold of myself. Why this morning didn't I think, hey, I have some tzedakah. Let's give it to those Yisayimim and those Aniyim and those people that need it. Why only right now, as I'm about to take out the money to give this woman, all of a sudden now, I have all these wonderful ideas for the money. Says the Karlina Rebbe, that's the proof it was the Yetzer Hara talking. If it was the Yetzer Tov, if it was really a good thought, that weighing the Kedima and Tzedakah and understanding who gets more, I wouldn't have thought about it now. I would have realized it earlier. But right now, if as I'm about to do something good, that's when it comes, that's what proved to me it's the eights of the Yetzer Hara. And therefore I gave away the money. This is an idea which is so powerful. This is what this wonderful young man, friend of mine, that told me how he said, you see it in every moment of your life. So I originally read this story and I saw this into the world of tzedakah. How often, someone tells us of a cause, we're finally moved to give, and we finally say we'll make a nice donation, and as we're about to do it, we start cheshboning. 1 second, why don't I give to this one? And what about that one? And all of a sudden our brains are running in rapid speed, which is true. That's one example. But in every example, Now, why now? You always have to ask yourself that question. Why now? Just tonight in shul, I won't say his name, but the chaver here will know who it was. So it was leftover chalent. It's leftover chalent. So we said, let's take the chalent and let's put it away for Shabbos. It's chalent. Chalent cook, it's gavaldik. So the person said, it's going to get dried out. What do we need it for? It's just going to become a mess. Okay, fine, whatever. Like why not? And again, he's like, no, and we always have so much extra food, and then you just have to take care of it, and whatever. 3 minutes later, he walks back in. He says, "You know what? I'm putting it in. I'm going to say, you're right. I'm going to take it, and I'm going to save it. I'm going to save the child." And I said, "Why? What happened?" He said, "You know the real reason why I wasn't saving the child? I was just lazy. That's the real reason. I didn't want to deal with it. It's disgusting. It's dirty. Like you don't deal with it." So as soon as you don't want to deal with it, all of a sudden your brain is 4,000 terutzim. A million different. Mesil Sharm writes this actually in the end of the first parak. How all of a sudden he says that the chayshech becomes yoim, and yoim becomes chayshech, and ra becomes toiv, and toiv becomes ra. We're building, and we have like a prepared speech to give why it's pashut and aveira to save this child. But where did it really come from? It didn't come from the Yetzer Toiv. Because if it came from the Yetzer Toiv, you would have all these cheshbonos earlier. It came from a different place. And this is something in so many areas of our life. If we were just to think and ask ourselves that one question, where is this coming from? Is this coming from a good place, or is this coming from a negative place? So the truth is, it's a beautiful vart. I think this might be a deep reasons why we sometimes have this issue of Aseh Atah Shalcha, why we're sometimes playing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because we're so busy cheshboning, and we have so many of these crazy calculations, we're not being honest. We're not being honest. So the real question is, and this we're going to conclude, so how do you get out of this? Because when you're in it, that's what you see. It's what the Mesil Sharm talks about. When you're in it, you have the whole shtickle Torah, right? The Rebbetzin sounded like she had such good reasons. What do you mean? There's aniyim and there's this, and it sounded great. Okay, so the Karliner Rebbe was able to extricate himself. The story we just spoke about, he was able to overcome, and he was able to say, obviously, if I was told to do it, it's the right thing to do, and then he realized where it came from. But how do we come to that point? So, 3 ways, very quickly, it's running late. Way number 1, and we're just going to bring a raya from the pasuk in a minute. Way number 1, in every scenario of our life, ask someone else. This is called Nikias. It's the most obvious thing in the world. When we see something, where do we see it from? The driver's seat. You ask anyone. You could ask sometimes, you can ask the person who you wouldn't trust. Forget about with your children. You wouldn't trust them with anything. And you tell them something, and their response is like, oh my gosh, I didn't think about that. How did you're not smart. How did you think about that? The answer is, you just didn't see it because you're coming from your perspective. The moment you're out of that driver's seat, someone else looks at you and says, it's so obvious which way to do it. So number 1 is you always have to ask other people what to do. Way number two is what the Mesil Sharm says, is to learn Musar. It's to learn Musar. Learn Musar. What does it mean to learn Musar? Those of you, I think our yeshivas sometimes have scarred us, or the opposite. I want to be careful. But, or the opposite. But what does it mean? What does it mean? Learning Musar means, what the Mesil Sharm says, thinking about what you do. If we were to have a few moments every day where we just stopped, turned off everything, and said, what did I do today? That is the greatest Musar, and probably the most painful Musar that we could do. Because we'll start thinking, did I daven? Did I not daven? Was I nice to him? Was I not nice? Did I talk right? Did I text right? Did I listen right? Did I watch right? All it takes sometimes is just to stop. Slow down the world already. And number 3 is, because we're all in the middle of working on our tefillah, Baruch Hashem, is to daven. It's to daven. It's to daven. Daven for what? Daven for yourself. And we're going to conclude, just because I want to tie it back into the parasha, and this we conclude. Another very famous vart. It says that Ila Toldois Aaron Moshe asks Rashi. No, they're not. They're not. The pasuk only tells us Bnei Aaron. Why does it say Bnei Moshe? So Rashi says the famous vart, if you teach your friend Torah, it says if you raise them. Beautiful vart. Beautiful vart. So let's take it one step deeper. How do you teach your friend Torah? You teach him Torah? Okay. You could teach by example also. If you are an upstanding individual, if you are a light unto the nation, if you're a Kiddush Hashem, you're teaching people Torah, and it's as if you get the credit, ki'ilu yalaldo, as if you gave birth to them. But the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, and with this we conclude, to something else. Says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, you know why Moshe Rabbeinu is credited with Aaron's children? Litzad shehu hispalel ba'adam. He davened for them. You daven for someone else, you get credit for them. That's how powerful a tefillah is. So, we can daven for ourselves, and we can daven for each other. We all know that we're all within the same rat race, and we're all within the same crazy world, that everything is so cloudy and so not clear. So we can daven for each other. You daven that our friends should have clarity. We daven that our spouse should have clarity. We daven that ourselves should have clarity. So, b'siyata d'shmaya, what we take away from an incredible parsha is the line that we knew, but maybe a drop deeper, is that do yours. Do yours, but do yours. No one should come out of here saying, oh, you know what the Rav said? I can lay back. I do too much. Don't do it. No. Do yours. Push yourself. Do it. But then, after you push, and after you try, when you're at that point, you're like, oh, that's the point that you say, why are you suffocating? Take a deep breath. Hashem has it under control. He doesn't need help. Hashem is a big boy. He'll take care of it. He'll take care of you. He'll take care of the family. He'll take care of everyone. But then, when we're asking questions and we're saying, what do you mean? But I'm supposed to this, I'm supposed to that, all the Torahs. Remember the Karlina Rebbe. Remember, that's the Eitz of the Yitzhahara. And when we can't even do that, which is usually where we're all holding. We're not holding at a place to see straight. We're not holding at a place of realizing that we have to stop. We're not holding at a place that we're suffocating. There's one answer. This is the answer to everything in this world. Is just daven. Halavai, we can daven for someone else. But if not, daven for yourself. Daven for yourself. And the Mirza Hashem, we'll all be able to reach the incredible places that we're supposed to reach.